Welcome to the Chrisman Commentary, daily mortgage news podcast. I'm your host, Robbie Chrisman. Topics on today's episode include some of the dollars and cents behind the government shutdown, my interview with Home Builders Institute's Ed Brady on the home building climate, evolving workforce trends, trade misconceptions, and the strategic solutions needed to rebuild America, and why we saw mortgage rates fall for the first time in 3 weeks yesterday. Looking for an all-in-one automated VOIEA platform that helps mortgage providers achieve up to 50% cost savings and industry-leading 75% completion rate? Look no further than Truework. You can learn more at truework.com. The stalemate and shutdown continue, all but eliminating the government release of economic news. Recall that the U.S. Treasury posted a $345 billion budget deficit in August, the largest monthly deficit of 2025 and the second worst August on record, but helped by tariff revenue. This is up from July's $291 billion deficit and has only been surpassed by last year's $380 billion deficit. Government spending surged to $689 billion for the month. Through the first 11 months of fiscal year 2025, the U.S. deficit was up to $1.97 trillion, on track to be the third largest annual deficit in history after 2020 and 2021. I think we can all get on the same page that we don't want larger deficits. Just like we can all get on the same page that occupancy shouldn't be a partisan issue. Letitia James has been indicted for mortgage fraud, and an attorney will tell you that fraud is difficult to prove, typically involving intent and knowledge, while critics are asking, why didn't Trump's 3 cabinet members get indicted for occupancy fraud as well? Or FHFA Director Bill Pulte's father and stepmother, who claimed dual homestead exemptions in Florida and Michigan. I'm sure the courts will sort things out, but each case should stand on its own merits. No, I don't like diving off into politics, so let me get back to a little more strict economic stuff here. Yesterday's session, another one bereft of key economic data as the U.S. government shutdown carried in to day 9, did bring remarks from Fed Governor Barr, who said that the FOMC should be cautious about adjusting policy. The muted reaction to a $22 billion 30-year bond reopening, where the high yield of 4.73% tailed the when-issued yield by a slight margin. We also learned that consumers' estimates of inflation have been rising this year, and not by volatile items like food and gas, as households brace for higher prices on imported goods tied to President Trump's tariffs. This increases the risk that inflation expectations will remain above the Fed's 2% target, and are closely watched by Fed officials as they seek to assess whether such levies will result in a one-time price shock or more persistent inflation surge. For today's interview, I want to welcome to the show Home Builder Institute's Ed Brady to talk about the home building climate, evolving workforce trends, trade misconceptions, and the strategic solutions needed to rebuild America. He's president and CEO of Home Builders Institute and has served on the Bipartisan Policy Center Housing Commission, National Housing Conference, and the Board of National Association of Home Builders. He was the National Association of Home Builders 2016 chairman, and in 2018 he was inducted into the Illinois Home Builders Hall of Fame. In 2023, he was inducted into the National Housing Hall of Fame.
I want to start with kind of a 30,000-foot high-level view of what's going on in the home building space, because for the last several years it's been, well, there's demand for homes, but builders aren't building at the requisite pace for a lot of people's taste. And then obviously there's reasons for that, whether it's costs or labor or whatever it might be. And so as we enter the fourth quarter here of 2025, what's kind of the pulse of home building, at least on the residential side of things, when you look at it?
Yeah, I think home builders have been holding their breath a little bit. I mean, we went through an unprecedented, zero cost of money, and then a fairly steep climb on mortgage rates, and a lot of the large builders fought through that by buying down loan mortgages, and so they built through some of that. But that, as you've seen, that has squeezed some of the public builders' margins, and small builders haven't been able to stomach that cost. And so, the market's a little soft right now. It's all regional. Where there's jobs, when there's job creation, is better, obviously. But one of the challenges is just the affordability. The cost to build a home today and the mortgage that somebody at a first-time buyer has to pay is twice what it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, pre-pandemic. And so the affordability and access to affordable on the new construction side is really tough right now. As you know, there's a lot of reasons for that. Regulatory burden's a big one. Labor force is certainly a big one. Land availability, lot availability, and then certainly rates. I mean, not too long ago, builders, and maybe currently builders, are paying 11, 12% rate on some of the commercial loans and land development, and that just doesn't pencil. And so until we get rates down, all these factors contribute, but until we get rates down, until we provide a sustainable labor force, until we reduce the regulatory burden on the cost, until we get certainty on the supply side of vendors and suppliers and materials and tariffs, it's going to be a rocky road. Having said that, there's still a huge pent-up demand, and we've been holding our breath for rates to come down as builders, and demand is there. The supply just isn't yet for those reasons.
Let's unpack a couple of those things you mentioned. You mentioned regulatory burden, the workforce rates. Start with the workforce here.
Yeah.
And I grew up in my economics classes. Obviously, there's an intersection of supply and demand. Is it as simple as, well, for the prices that people want to be paid to build these homes, that it just doesn't translate to an end product that's viable at market? What are we seeing in terms of the labor shortage? What's driving it, and how can it be remedied?
Well, labor is productivity. And when I talk about labor, and I was on the other side of the table for 30 years as a builder, working with my contractors, my subcontractors, my suppliers and vendors, and frankly, beating them up on price. You got to lower prices because I can't sell houses for what I need to sell at those prices. And so, sitting on that side of the table, I understand that, subcontractors are trying to maintain their price, but because of the lack of labor, it is more difficult to recruit people, to keep them, and to provide the labor force to build these homes. And we're still losing 5 tradespeople and only bringing in 2 to 3 new people. And so the actual production is continuing to go down. Our chief economist at NHB would say it's going to take a few years to get the production up. I use Robbie, the scenario where if I had a framing crew of 4 people that had 10 years plus experience, they could frame a house in a week. But new people that are greener and haven't performed and got that craftsmanship, that superior skill yet, will take 2 weeks. So if I pay them the same thing, that 1 week crew makes twice as much money, and the 2 week crew costs me time and money. And so productivity has to increase in order for us to get the prices stabilized and provide the labor force. And quite frankly, I think we're a couple decades away from that. And that's only if we turn the tables on recruiting and the perception of what this industry has to offer. So we've got an uphill battle. I think we can do it. Certainly, we've got some tailwinds working for us on higher education and the cost of education and degrees that aren't coming out with good jobs. But we have to change the perception in the industry on the labor force and the skilled trades.
Yeah, I think perception is a big part of it. You also mentioned regulation, and there was chatter leading up to the election last November. Both parties had ideas on how to get more building going on. I think there's certain tax credits. There was talk of opening federal lands. What regulations are really impeding things out there, and what could lead to, from a regulatory standpoint, a more favorable building environment?
Yeah, I think we just came out with a study about 25% of the cost of a single family home is regulatory burden. Probably 80% of that is land use and restrictions. And so we have to, you mentioned federal lands, that's helpful in certain region areas or big city areas like Las Vegas or Utah's or so forth and so on, but it doesn't help in the city of Chicago. And so we have to frankly incentivize, all zoning is local, and it's been restrictive in many parts of the country. And mayors and councils, legislators have to look at how do we unleash some of that restrictive zoning, whether it be a higher density or whether it be creating pockets of tax increment financing, or whatever the case may be. We need to incentivize municipalities, states, local governments to open up opportunities for land so that it's more accessible and more affordable. And that will help drive the price, at least stabilize the price, if not drive the price down. But the restrictive land policies are very burdensome on developers in order to develop lots that can build at an affordable rate. As a builder, if I got 20% land cost in my end product, I was bumping against the top. And so we need to reduce that land cost in order to provide accessible, affordable housing. And then there's,
go ahead.
You mentioned regulatory burdens or incentives like tax credits. We just wiped out the energy efficient tax credits for whatever your politics are, but the tax credits, opportunity for builders to take advantage of incentives to put in sustainable housing. Those types of things will add to the regulatory, or at least the release of some regulatory burdens that causes cost increases.
I know HBI is doing some really cool things around developing the workforce and helping to address some of these issues. We spoke today, training, certification. Any initiatives that you think are pretty neat you're working on over there that are worth sharing with listeners today?
Yeah, we're always looking for resources. We're a nonprofit, been around for 57 years. We don't charge any tuition to any of our students. And so we serve a underserved population that is looking for opportunities to expand their careers and their opportunities to create families and be part of a productive society. And so we are talking to the administration, talking to state and local governments, is how do you unleash some of this money? As an example, we have academies throughout the country, from Sacramento to Charlotte, kind of the smile, if you will. You mentioned it earlier about where the jobs are. Maybe we had a conversation this morning. We have to figure out how to open up more resources for HBIs of the world in order to bring new people into the industry. We're not going to make it up with 40-year-olds. We've got to start them at 7th and 8th grade. We've got to nurture them and introduce them to it in high school. Then we've got to give them real training at the higher levels of high school and certainly post-secondary, community college levels, and so forth, adult learning. And that takes resources. Just most recently, we proposed 24 academies throughout the country that would take all these populations under one roof, a 9-week program. We'd certify them, and then we'd try and place them in the industry. We don't feel successful unless we place them in a career path and give them that opportunity. But that takes resources. I'm encouraged by the president and the administration's emphasis on trade schools. Just talked about it last week. But we really got to know where the money's coming from. And frankly, state grants, block grants to the states means that everybody's going to do it a little bit differently. And so when we propose our 24 academies, it's throughout the country. it's consistent. You're getting the same training and the same product of student that is being put on the street, but we need the resources in order to do that. And so we're also working very, very hard to get our curriculum and trade schools back into the high schools. It was left absent for 20 to 30 years because everybody had to go to college. And I think we're making a difference. We're in over 400 high schools now throughout the country. Shop class, if you're my age, is coming back, called a little different, career technical education today. But shop class is introducing the trades to students again. And we're getting a lot of students that are coming right out of high school that are choosing to go into the workforce, not into a 4-year degree or even a 2-year degree. And so I think that kind of innovative approach to get back into the high schools, create opportunities at the community level for people to start learning a trade. But frankly, we need the funding in order to do it.
Yeah, funding would certainly be a big help. And there's a variety of divergent paths that things could go. But I'm going to ask you to kind of pull out your crystal ball and tell me what path forward you think, generally speaking, for residential home building, kind of where it's headed. And I'm happy for you to take an optimistic view of it. Yeah. But how do you see things progressing into the next couple of years?
I think we're going to build, as a builder, you give me a project, I'll build it. And so I'm confident that there's enough professionals out there, enough contractors, enough builders, enough young people that want to be builders that we're going to build the inventory that we need. We've had a big gap, and we're obviously behind the 8 ball on the number of units that we have. And that's in large part at the lower level, the affordable side. I think the interest rates coming down that will unlock a lot of the existing inventory out there at 2.5%, 3%, 3.5%. People don't want to give that up. Interest rates got to get below 6%. They'll start thinking about releasing some of that existing inventory, and they'll need to buy new construction or upgrade their existing living quarters and conditions. So I'm very optimistic that the home building industry will deliver and can deliver, but it does take a workforce. So I'm preaching to the choir on the crisis that's out there on the labor force. Shovel ready projects mean that they're funded, but if you don't have anybody to operate the shovel, then you can't do it. You can't build it. And so we've got a lot of different angles to overcome. But optimistic on the affordability side. I'm starting to see municipalities unlock and incentivize builders and developers, creating more density that will allow more affordability. Maybe not the 1 acre lots that some states demand and the 2,500 square foot housing that they demand, but that's the answer. Is we've got to create more density and we've got to create more affordability, and the builders will build it. And so I'm optimistic, but rates got to come down, regulatory burdens got to come down, and we need to, frankly, change the perception of what this industry has to offer to get a labor force that can build them.
Very sage words. I think there's a ton of really good nuggets from this conversation. All pretty one-sided coming from your side, not from my side, but I appreciate you making the time, and certainly wish you and HBI and the entire building community the best of luck going forward. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Robbie. Appreciate it.
Mortgage rates fell for the first time in 3 weeks after hitting year-to-date lows in the week ending September 18th. For the week ending October 9th, the 30 and 15-year mortgage rates in Freddie Mac's primary mortgage market survey fell 4 basis points and 2 basis points respectively to 6.30% and 5.53%, with the 30-year rate 2 basis points lower from a year earlier and the 15-year rate still 12 basis points higher. For a change, today's economic calendar includes some data that will not be impacted by the partial government shutdown. Preliminary October Michigan sentiment will be released later this morning. Markets will also receive remarks from Chicago Fed President Goolsbee and St. Louis Fed President Mussolem, And today is Class B net out ahead of Monday's Columbus Day holiday when bond markets are closed, but I will produce a podcast for you, devoted listener. We begin Friday with agency MBS prices better by about an eighth from Thursday's close, the 2-year yielding 3.58 and the 10-year yielding 4.11 after closing yesterday at 4.15%. Let's wrap up with a joke and some housekeeping. A deeply religious man, whom I will call Dave, finds himself in dire financial trouble. He prays earnestly to God to help him out of his predicament. God, I'm about to lose my car. Please help me. Let me win the lottery. Lottery night comes, but sadly, Dave is not the winner. Things go from bad to worse. Without a car to get to work, Dave loses his job. Without a job, his mortgage is foreclosed on and he loses his home. Without a home, his wife leaves him, taking the kids. After each horrible step of the mounting crisis, he pleads with God to let him win the lottery. But he never does. Finally, broke, hungry, living on the street, he tries again. God, please, my life is a wreck. I have no car, no home, no family. Please let me win the lottery just this once so that I can turn my life around. I beg you. Suddenly, a flash of light comes from the sky, and the voice of God echoes down from the heavens. Dave, meet me halfway. Buy a damn ticket. Thanks again to Truework for sponsoring today's podcast. Truework is the only all-in-one automated VOIEA platform that helps mortgage providers achieve up to 50% cost savings with an industry-leading 75% completion rate. To learn more, visit truework.com.